coronavirus crisis, new developments in the efforts to pass a COVID-19 relief bill. We're on Capitol Hill, where senators worked through the night and Vice President Kamala Harris cast her first tie-breaking vote. Reaching out, we hear from the head of CatholicTherapist.com on dealing with the effects from the coronavirus pandemic. And sympathy from the Holy Father. Pope Francis has a message for musicians whose work has been interrupted by the coronavirus pandemic. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, February 5th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Stating abortion is not health care, 48 pro-life senators write to Democratic leader Chuck Schumer in an effort to protect the conscious rights of Americans opposed to abortion. They are pledging to block any bill that includes language to strip away pro-life protections. Correspondent Mark Irons reports. Mark?
Tracy, in this letter, Senator Steve Daines, also signed by Leader Mitch McConnell, the letter from Republicans, they're calling on Democrats to preserve federal protections for the unborn and prevent taxpayers from being forced to fund abortions.
Nearly 50 Republican senators vote to block a pro-abortion agenda. U.S. Senator Steve Daines, founder and chair of the Senate Pro-Life Caucus, writes, "We have a message for Democratic leader Schumer. We will vote to block any radical pro-abortion agenda. That includes any bill that undermines the Hyde Amendment and other long-standing pro-life protections." The cry to fight for life coming hours after the Senate voted in favor of pushing the president's COVID relief plan forward.
The Senate being equally divided, the vice president votes in the affirmative.
The measure allows Democrats to move the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief plan through the chamber without Republican support. Vice President Kamala Harris cast a tie-breaking vote.
The concurrent resolution as amended is adopted.
Republicans push back on one element of the bill, writing, Senate Democrats overwhelmingly rejected an amendment that would restrict federal relief funding going to states and localities that impose stricter restrictions on houses of worship. Also defeated last night, an amendment by GOP Senator Mike Lee for the border wall. Senator Marco Rubio is critical of Democrats' handling of immigration policy.
This is going to create chaos on the border, and it is inhumane to lure people to this country with a policy that is encouraging these traffickers.
Larry Summers, the former economic advisor to President Obama, warns the Democrats' bold COVID relief plan may be too big and they may need to take careful consideration of the risks. At the Capitol, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Newly released numbers show a gain of just 49,000 jobs last month. President Joe Biden says at that rate, it would take 10 years to get back to full employment. He says by the grace of God, lawmakers can do something consequential to bring Americans hope. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, President Joe Biden wants Congress to act big on his $1.9 trillion proposal to help the nation turn the corner on the pandemic. And today, once again, he went before the cameras to lay out on the line what he says is at stake.
Once-in-a-century virus has decimated our economy.
President Joe Biden shares the grim numbers as the coronavirus pandemic continues to beat down the economy.
It's very clear our economy is still in trouble. We added just 6,000 private sector jobs in the country last month.
And more bad numbers. According to President Biden, 4 million workers have been sidelined, no job, for half a year or longer. And 2.5 million women who used to have a job gone from the workforce.
So, the way I see it, the biggest risk is not going too big if we go too small. My plan creates more jobs, creates more economic growth, and does more to make us competitive with the rest of the world than any other plan.
The coronavirus is also impacting mental health. The COVID-19 response team saying today that one study shows 28% of U.S. adults reported symptoms of depression, 8% thought about suicide, and 18% started or increased substance use to cope with the pandemic. Another concern is practically right in their hands.
Right now, we just don't have enough gloves. We're nearly 100% reliant on overseas manufacturers to export to us, our country's surgical gloves that protect healthcare workers. And that's unacceptable, and we're using all of our authorities to fix it.
And the continued plea:
when a vaccine becomes available to you, get vaccinated. You will not only be protecting yourself, your family, but you will be making a major step in a positive way to protecting the community.
Also tonight, more than 1,100 troops are being deployed to vaccination centers to help Americans get immunized. The Biden administration is considering sending a mask to every American. And some good news here, the number of coronavirus cases in the past few weeks at nursing homes has dropped. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The board of directors for the Knights of Columbus has elected a new Supreme Knight. Current Supreme Knight Carl Anderson is retiring at the end of the month after more than 20 years of service and upon reaching the mandatory retirement age of 70. Patrick Kelly will become the order's 14th Supreme Knight starting on March 1st. He has worked in senior level positions for the Knights. In a statement, Patrick Kelly writes in part, quote, "I look forward to continuing Carl's great work and will strive to guide the Knights of Columbus by the principles of charity, unity, and fraternity, according to the vision of Blessed Michael McGivney." Officials in China say their vaccines for the coronavirus are, quote, safe and effective.
目前中国已有多支疫苗在境外开展的3期临床试验进展顺利。
A spokesman with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs pushed back on claims the vaccines were unsafe, saying the doses were approved in several countries. The allegations stem from a lack of trial information released by Beijing. Germany's health minister says the country is preparing to deliver the first batches of a newly authorized vaccine to its citizens.
AstraZeneca-Impfstoff bis zum 19. Februar 1,7 Millionen zusätzliche Impfdosen.
Health Minister Jens Spahn says the country will receive 1.7 million extra doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine. For now, it will only be given to people between the ages of 18 and 64 because of the lack of data on older age groups. Well, here in the U.S., Johnson & Johnson has applied for emergency use authorization for its single-dose coronavirus vaccine. Data released last week showed that it was about 66% effective at preventing moderate to severe COVID-19. If approved, Johnson & Johnson's vaccine would become the third one to be authorized for emergency use here in the U.S. Joining me now on Skype is Dr. Bob Lahita, professor of medicine at New York Medical College and chairman of medicine at St. Joseph University Hospital. Dr. Lahita, welcome back. Always so good to speak with you. There is a lot that we want to get to, but first, I want to start off with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Based on what we know so far, what are some of the advantages or benefits to this particular vaccine, aside from it being a single dose?
Well, besides being a single dose, it's a whole new vaccine concept. It's what we call a viral vector vaccine. And basically, we're taking an innocuous adenovirus and putting a little bit of the RNA of the COVID virus in it and giving it to you. One-shot deal, can be refrigerated at a normal temperature, and it provides immunity after that one shot. Now, the interesting thing for the variants, I'm told that the data show that this is a very good virus that blocks, a very good vaccine that blocks transmission, and also, even to a lower efficacy, works on the variants, particularly the British variant and also the South African variant. So that's good news.
Yeah, indeed. Definitely encouraging news there. And some other encouraging news this week. The U.S. saw the number of new COVID-19 cases as well as the number of hospitalizations for COVID-19 actually decrease across the country. What, if anything, should we make of this?
Well, this is very, very exciting. We're noting it in the Northeast as well. We've sort of flattened out. There are very few patients in the intensive care unit now. We have very few deaths per day in the area, in the state. We are still having people dying, but less than the thousands that we saw back in the summer and early spring. The numbers that are dying, and tragic as it is, are in the hundreds now, which is, if we can make something good out of that, it is the fact that the numbers are going down. So people are getting COVID. A lot of people are getting COVID. Not as many as before in the spring and summer, and those patients are staying out of the hospital, which is the most important thing, because we don't want to ventilate people, put them on ventilators, intubate them, and the mortality is about 50% if you get ventilated and are intubated.
Yeah. And as you know, the Biden administration plans to ship doses of the approved COVID-19 vaccines actually directly to retail pharmacies next week. What are your thoughts on that plan?
Well, that's a terrific plan, actually. It's going to 6,500 pharmacies, and those pharmacies will be able to administer the vaccine. It's very, very important to have people who can give the vaccine. You know, we can go 24/7, and I'm told at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's nobody getting a vaccine, even though there are nurses and paramedics who are there to give the vaccines in these public places. So the pharmacies are going to be there, able to give the vaccine, and I'm sure the lines will be a lot smaller, and we'll be able to accommodate President Biden's plan, which is to give 1.5 million doses daily to Americans.
And Dr. Lahita, we have probably less than a minute, but I want to ask you this. As we know, a lot of people are really wanting to get this vaccine, but there are also those who may be hesitant for one reason or the other. What would be your message to those folks who maybe are on the fence about getting the vaccines?
I would say that these vaccines are extremely safe. They do not cause infertility. There's nothing being implanted in your body. They're very molecular. If you do get a bit of tiredness and achiness, injection site soreness, so be it. It's better than being intubated, winding up in the intensive care unit, and God forbid, dying. But it happens every day. So get that vaccine, get out there and get it. It's the best thing that you can do for yourself and for your family.
Dr. Bob Lahita, thank you so much. We always appreciate your analysis.
Thanks, Tracy.
Coming up, the president of France speaks out in defense of former President Trump. And we hear from Pope Francis as he speaks to musicians about the beauty and importance of music. German Cardinal Rainer Maria Volke is facing criticism over his handling of a report on child sexual abuse by clergy. Cardinal Volke is keeping the study under wraps, citing legal concerns. Local church leaders, including the head of the German Bishops' Conference, are calling for full transparency. Libya is one step closer to having a new government. Delegates from Libya's warring factions voted today to select 4 leaders to guide the country until December. That's when national elections are scheduled to take place. The oil-rich North African country has been largely lawless since the former leader Muammar Gaddafi was toppled and killed back in 2011. A senior member of Myanmar's ruling party is the latest prominent politician to be arrested. As Myanmar's, or Burma's, new military government confronts continuing resistance to its own seizure of power, Win Tain, a longtime confidant of the ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi, was arrested at his home in Yangon this morning. He says he is being detained for sedition. The president of France is criticizing social media networks for restricting former President Donald Trump's access to their platforms.
At the very second when they were sure it was over of the power, suddenly cut the mic.
President Emmanuel Macron says the decision to ban former President Trump is not a democratic answer, adding he was very upset by the decision, in part because it was made by a private company rather than through discussions or regulations. Pope Francis extends his empathy to musicians whose work has been interrupted by the coronavirus pandemic.
Il cantare bene è per stare bene.
In a message to an international conference on church and music, the Holy Father says to sing well is to be well. Music helps the Bible speak in new ways, and the beauty of sound in silence allows us to listen. Joining us now is Father Enda Murphy from the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. He is also one of the speakers at the conference. Father, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, what is the mission of organizing a conference on church and music?
Well, the mission is obviously, first of all, to appreciate the importance of music in the life of the church. Obviously, there's the great patrimony of church music that we have, particularly Gregorian chant, which is patrimony not just of the Catholic Church, but of the whole world, because it has had such an influence on the musical tradition, particularly of the West. But the title of the conference was Context and Text. So it's looking at the various contexts in which the liturgy has been performed and in terms of the music that has gone along with that and what the texts have been, how those texts have been composed, and looking at as well at how they've been translated. So it was really an appreciation of that work and seeing how it has influenced not just the lives of believers and of Christians and of Catholics in particular, but also how it's played a very important role in the culture life of broader society as well.
And I understand that you spoke about the Latin language in regards to liturgy. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, my contribution was titled From Latin to Local. So it was really about the process of translating the liturgical books, the typical editions as they're called, which are all composed in the Latin language, the work of translating those into local or vernacular languages. And it was just a journey through that process, which was basically, it had begun in small ways before even the Second Vatican Council, but the Second Vatican Council debated it and decided that vernacular languages should play a much greater role in the liturgy of the Church. And indeed, Pope Paul VI in 1965 said that these vernacular languages, local languages, now too had to take their rightful place as the voice of the Church at prayer. So I was just really looking at the interchange, and Pope Francis always talks about a culture of encounter, and that's particularly true when the Roman liturgy or the liturgical books meet with another culture, and there's an exchange and there's an enrichment there, particularly as the gospel takes root and grows within a particular culture. So it was just an exploration of that process, and it's a very challenging process, as we probably know, but also very rewarding when we can get beautiful translations which we can pray well and which we can understand, and which can also lead us into a great appreciation of how beautiful it is also to pray in our own tongue rather than borrowing from other places.
Well, Father, thank you so much for coming on today, sharing that with us, and thank you for what you do. We appreciate it. Father Enda Murphy from the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments. Thank you again.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, we talk with a Catholic mental health counselor on ways to deal with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. A recent analysis finds as rates of depression and anxiety are on the rise due to the coronavirus pandemic, more people are experiencing insomnia. Researchers from the University of Ottawa found nearly 1/4 of those surveyed reported having insomnia. Healthcare workers reported the highest rate of insomnia, with over 36% reporting difficulty sleeping. To help us talk more about how we can safeguard our mental health, we are enlisting the help of a Catholic mental health counselor who has been a longtime resource for EWTN.
We only have about 40 seconds. Thank you, Allison. You're wonderful. You're one of those psychotherapists that a lot of people need, that talk to you about Jesus, huh?
And that is Allison Ricciardi, founder and president of CatholicTherapist.com, from her appearance with Mother Angelica more than 25 years ago. And Allison joins me right now on Skype. Allison, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. I want to talk more about this connection between sleep and our mental health, especially as we face challenges related to the pandemic. I read there's even a term for the lack of sleep actually connected to the pandemic. It's called coronasomnia. Can you talk more about why sleep is so important and also the healthy ways that we can ease anxiety and have a restful sleep?
Sure. It is a huge problem today. I think, first off, we have to realize that a lot of what we've been subjected to is a lot of misinformation, disinformation, hyperinformation. So just turning everything off, getting off of social media, getting off of the mainstream media is going to do wonders for a lot of people. I can't tell you over the years how many times people tell me I can't sleep, but what they do is they watch the news and try to go to sleep. It's not going to work. So also working on having a bedtime unwind routine, maybe praying the rosary, reading a novel, doing something, even a sitcom, something is going to start to calm your mind down. I think also we need to pray for the virtue of hope. We're feeling very hopeless right now in society. And we have to realize God is still on his throne. He is still in control. So, you know, if people need help, I mean, if it's getting to the point where you're not able to function because of anxiety or depression, you need to seek out some help because there's a lot of isolation going on.
Yeah, and Allison, I was going to ask you about that feeling of isolation and fear. How can folks overcome that?
Well, staying connected with people, making phone calls, you know, even sometimes you don't feel like it because you're feeling depressed. There's probably somebody who's in worse shape than you are. So to reach out to them, reach out particularly to the elderly. They've been really locked up for a long time with no visitors. A phone call can make a big, big difference in their lives. So we need to connect. We need to, like I said, stop listening to, you know, this campaign of fear and recognize that God is in control. Also, knowledge is power. A lot of what we're hearing isn't actually true. So we do need to listen to kind of like, instead of looking at how many people died, look at how many people are surviving. Like it's over a 99% survival rate. You know, it's all in our perspective and how we look at things. But even, you know, I think people need to really look at nutrition. You know, one of the things that we're doing, you know, when we're locked up and when, you know, our routines, you might be out of work or whatever, we look for comfort foods. And those are not always the best thing. They may feel good when you're having them. So, you know, to kind of cut back on the sugar, you know, get more fruits and vegetables, more healthy living is going to go a long way, even in terms of sleep. That we need to be looking at that and how we're, you know, even having something like chamomile tea at night, laying off the caffeine if you find yourself anxious. You know, there's a lot of simple things that people can be doing.
Yeah, that is great advice. A lot of people don't even think about that. That is true. Earlier, we showed a clip of you and Mother Angelica, and I hope you don't mind me asking if you could share some thoughts on Mother for us.
Oh, Mother was an inspiration. What she was able to accomplish, I mean, she was just, as we all know, a character in the best sense of the word. And that show, in fact, was inspirational for starting Catholic Therapists because I knew there were other therapists out there that were solid in their faith, that integrated the faith into their practice. And it was a matter of just putting them all in one place, which is why I started Catholic Therapists. And, you know, those, especially now, I think Mother Angelica is a good example for a lot of people who might be displaced in their jobs or things are changing. Mother Angelica started EWTN at 58 years old. So it is never too late to reinvent yourself. It's never too late to start something new, to be entrepreneurial. You know, God will honor that. So to not lose hope, I think, you know, people, particularly in their 50s, 60s, 40s, whatever, things are changing and it can be very scary, but there's always hope, you know, so start thinking about maybe like what your skill level is and how can I monetize that? A lot of people are so afraid. So I think, you know, Mother's a real inspiration for that she didn't let anything stand in her way. And God just honored that.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we let you go, Allison, do you have any other words of encouragement or hope or any favorite prayers that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I think the Rosary is my favorite prayer because we're meditating on those mysteries. Fulton Sheen talked about the Rosary, how it's meditative, it's physical, we're moving the beads. You know, there's so many benefits to that. And certainly that's what Our Lady has asked us for everywhere she appears, is to pray the Rosary. And she told Sister Lucia that there is nothing that cannot be solved by praying the Rosary. So I think to kind of enter into that meditative state, it's a great way of kind of like learning how to relax and to recognize that there's, you know, God has solutions. You know, the darkest day probably ever was Holy Saturday. I mean, it was a very disillusioning day for all of the disciples, but look what God did after that. So as dark as things may be right now, that's when God really shines, and either in the world and in our lives personally. So always, always, always hold on to hope, and just even praying for the virtue of hope. You know, scripture, reading about the saints. Read Mother Angelica's life, you know, Raymond Arroyo's book. It's awesome. It's very inspiring, and that's what we need to look for right now is inspiration. It's very easy to look to the darkness now, but we need to look for those lights that shine, right? The saints among us.
Absolutely. Allison, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for all of that. God bless you, and God bless you for what you do.
God bless you too. Bye-bye.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night, and God bless.